Former President Trump's team is grilling his former attorney, Michael Cohen, right now. They are back in session after a short break just a little while ago. And on Cohen, it's all about the history of lies and painting a picture of Michael Cohen motivated by revenge. Didn't he write a book named Revenge? Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner, here with my co-hosts Kayleigh McEnany and Emily Compagno. Also joining us today, Fox News contributor and president of American Spirit Enterprises, Tammy Bruce, is here, and host of the Ben Ferguson podcast and co-host of Verdict with Ted Cruz podcast, Ben Ferguson, is here. Michael Cohen right now on the stand. Cross-examination taking a couple of days, and he's facing some heat. Meanwhile, his former legal advisor claims Cohen has been lying again and again. Robert Costello previously worked for the Southern District of New York, and he aided Cohen in 2018 after he was hit with federal charges. Yesterday, he was called to testify before House lawmakers. Costello said Cohen once swore that Trump was not involved with any payments made to Stormy Daniels. And earlier today, Costello reiterated that Cohen is motivated by revenge. Watch.
When I met with Michael Cohen on the first day at the Regency Hotel when he was suicidal by his own admission, because he saw these enormous legal problems coming his way. They were so bad in his mind that he was willing to kill himself. And so I kept on going back and suggesting to him, listen, Michael, if you have something truthful on Donald Trump, now is the time to cooperate. And he kept on saying over and over again, 10 to 20 times, I swear to God, Bob, I don't have anything on Donald Trump. He kept on saying, I have nothing on Donald Trump. And then when we got into the discussion of the Stormy Daniels NDA, he said specifically, and I cross-examined him on this was my idea. It was his idea to take care of the NDA because he had been contacted by a lawyer for Stormy Daniels who said she was going to claim that Donald Trump had sex with her. Cohen said, I didn't believe the allegation, but nevertheless, it would be embarrassing to Melania. That's Michael Cohen's words.
But if you're saying he's lying now, who's to say he wasn't lying then when you first came across him?
Here's the other thing. Donald Trump, when he went to Washington, D.C., when he was elected, he took the whole Trump inner circle to Washington with one exception, Michael Cohen. You're negotiating with this guy for an NDA, and yet you're telling him how annoyed you are that Donald Trump didn't take you to Washington where you could be attorney general or chief of staff. You don't think that's sitting on this guy's mind when he writes a book called Revenge? He went to jail and he's left alone in New York. I think that's his motivation now.
Look, overarching, that is some damage to Michael Cohen right there. There was, and our own John Roberts was reporting this last hour, a discrepancy in some of what Costello was saying with the timeline, and that could be problematic with the defense calling him. But otherwise, I mean, what a person to have on the stand against Michael Cohen.
Right. And you're talking about the timeline of the NDA. So, I mean, that is something that needs to be cleared up. The NDA happened before the election, not after. But Costello, I find him to be very authentic. What he's saying is, I think, really important. Imagine you're sitting there at home and prosecutors come to you or your attorney comes to you and says, you're staring down jail time. You will very likely go to jail. Do you have anything on Donald Trump? What are you going to do in that situation? Well, we know what Michael Cohen was about to do. According to Costello, seriously contemplating jumping off the roof of the New York City Regency.
Oof.
He was suicidal. That's how much these legal matters were weighing down on him. So in that moment, as you're looking at your beautiful family, you're thinking about suicide. If you have anything on Donald Trump, do you think you're going to hand it over? I would maintain the answer is yes. But what did he say to Costello? He said this, according to Costello, each time Cohen said to me, I swear to God, Bob, I don't have anything on Donald Trump. He didn't give it up then, but now all of a sudden he changes when he's out on, this big tour on TikTok. He had sold books previously. What Costello said is huge. I can't imagine, unless there's some information we don't know, the defense not calling him as a witness. You point out the one discrepancy. Well, you're standing up against a towering, tall tower of lies from Michael Cohen versus maybe the NDA got the wrong year.
So, and, the timeline is usually the backbone of many cases. So it would come up, they'd have to address that, and then you move on. I mean, it could be a memory thing, could just simply be a mistake. We're talking, a year versus a different year in terms of what he said. But the point of all of this, though, Kayleigh, that you just hit on is really critical. You would call him as a defense witness even after this. Is that even necessary? I mean, it's not like the defense is losing right now.
No, they're not losing. And I think that's a fair calculation to make. But he underscores so much of what the defense is saying. I would want him to nail home the inaccuracies of Michael Cohen. Not only that, I would also point out that he says Michael Cohen said he paid this NDA himself because he didn't want to cause harm to the family of Donald Trump. He didn't want Melania to find out. That also weighs right into the arguments from Hope Hicks and others that Donald Trump cared about his family. To me, there's a lot to gain from Costello.
Interesting.
I also think there's something else. If you go back to this payment, and I want to read this. It says, Costello testified that Cohen's motivation for this became obvious. He had desires to work in the Trump administration after the 2016 election. Cohen, he says, apparently thought that he was going to Trump was going to make him the Attorney General of the United States of America, or at least Chief of Staff of the President. So if you want to know why you would pay the payment, why you would take the HELOC out to make the payment, why you would try to do this, I mean, honestly, if you think about it, you go back to Trump afterwards like, hey, man, I really hooked you up. I kept this all quiet. You didn't know about it. I took care of it. I took my own funds out. I hid it from my own wife because she does the finances. Now's my payday. I want Chief of Staff or the Attorney General of the United States of America. I also think it tells you how insane Cohen is in general. There was no chance he was going to become the Attorney General of the United States of America. He wasn't on an A list, B list, C list, or the W you know what list. Like, he wasn't on any list. But he thought he could probably buy his way into that job, which also tells you, I think, about how corrupt of an individual, how untrustworthy he is. It's almost like you're holding him for blackmail. I say
no, it's not almost like that.
It is.
It is like that.
Yeah.
He recorded him surreptitiously, his own client, while he was contemporaneously giving his client advice. That is an ethical violation. It's a rules violation here in New York with the bar. I mean, it's got a lot of problems to it, but your point is well taken. I mean, this was a guy who was willing to do anything to get what he wanted. But also, I mean, he's a self-aggrandizing fool.
Yeah.
I mean, if he thinks he's going to run the White House for the president.
At minimum. I mean, I can't get my head around the idea that Michael Cohen, who had no experience in dealing with things the Attorney General of the United States of America would deal with, actually believed that he was literally at the top of the list for that job with Donald Trump. And then at the bare minimum, like his consolation prize is, all right, well, you'll be Chief of Staff. That is insane. And it tells you about this guy. There's a reason why he's successful on TikTok right now, and that's it.
Well, look, and that's what Kayleigh and others have told me today. Legal experts are saying, look, you're winning this case if you can just hit Michael Cohen enough. Emily.
A few different points that I think help to round out as well the shape of Cohen as an interested party in the outcome, right? Which is that sense of desperation. And Costello, as we said earlier, he also talked about the fact that Cohen likes to cherry pick emails. He likes to cherry pick messages, obviously, to sort of bolster his position. But the whole point is that the jury's only getting a small slice of it. And we see here that the motive behind it is clearly a desperate man. And I cannot underscore enough the lengths a person will go to when they feel desperate that we have seen in our criminal justice system, financially, fraudulently, criminally, and some are driven to suicide. So the notion that he felt somehow dismayed, somehow discarded, somehow betrayed by Trump and his family was also played earlier this morning during Cross when there was an audio of a podcast played where he repeated again what Trump did to me and my family. But it's unclear what that actually means. Like, what are you exactly talking about? Because the investigation into Michael Cohen, of course, had nothing to do with President Trump. And if it's that betrayal that you didn't end up being the ambassador to Sweden, I think that's not exactly grounds for a true betrayal. So I just point that out to underscore again the lengths of his desperation and that there's so much more to this. And I thought also something that struck me about Costello's interview this morning with Fox is the amount of exculpatory evidence, frankly, that he has that the prosecution has ignored. And we know that baked into the criminal justice system that prosecutors they must turn over any evidence that is in the defense's favor. That's what exculpatory means.
Why do you think they didn't?
Because they never got it. Because they only picked certain things.
They cherry-picked, too.
Right. It's the same reason Weisselman hasn't been subpoenaed either. The whole point, if there is anything in Trump's favor, which is so much, it's the 99% of this entire story. Apparently, it doesn't exist in Alvin Bragg's world.
One quick one, just to follow up with you, Emily, before I go to Tammy. Why make Cohen your last witness? Like, that can't be a good thing for the prosecution.
The prosecution, to my mind, sees him as a weak witness for the credibility issues and everything that we've been discussing. He is the most inveterate liar.
So you want to end there?
So because they set the scene earlier to distract the jurors. Oh, here's salacious testimony from an adult porn star. Oh, here's a lot of X's and O's about AT&T bills and business records that you can't follow because it's confusing. And here, by the end, this is the crux of it, and hoping that you believe it. Keep in mind, too, our journalists are reporting that from the courtroom, Cohen was yelling, full-blown yelling from the witness stand over the audio recordings that were being presented. So clearly he is showing his emotionality and his volatility behaviorally as well.
Tammy.
Well, again, to that point, normally what you'd want to do when you've got a weak witness like this or someone who can't be trusted is you bring in someone then who can corroborate that, right? That's the final person.
Yeah.
That they don't have that. The jury's going to notice. The two lawyers on the jury are going to notice that. Everyone is drawing their own conclusion. And I would say also to the other point about his attitude about being attorney general or anything else, gives you a sense of a man who's not going to be micromanaged. Because that's been his argument about Donald Trump, that he was just a doer. He was micromanaged. But then suddenly he's thinking he's going to be the freaking attorney general. It's a chihuahua is what he is portraying himself as. But then he believes himself to be the German Shepherd. That's what he thinks it was. That's his problem.
Wow,
So
I didn't know that freaking was
So
part
true.
of the title. But maybe when
go.
you're a
It should be
pretty
self-aggrandizing
accurate.
fool,
That's right.
that's what happens.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kayleigh McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.